Hello there, folks. Back again with another speed paint for you guys, and we're continuing the theme of doing Halloween-themed speed paints for October. This week, I'm going to be drawing a bunch of different Mothman character designs inspired by classic Halloween monsters. So, without further ado, let's get into the speed paint. Our first classic Halloween Mothman is actually going to be the Mummy. Now, I originally wanted to do a very simple design when I first went into this sketch, but as I kept looking at it, as I kept thinking about it, I just kept adding more and more to make this less like the classic cartoon mummy and more like an actual regal Egyptian mummy. And I had a lot of fun with this design. It might actually be my favorite of the batch, which doesn't usually happen with the first drawing. Now, I went with this pose with its arms/wings in the air to sort of allude to the way scarab beetles are drawn in ancient Egyptian art. I also wanted to give it this sort of magical sun-like orb above its head to sort of signify a sunrise, like it's coming back to life. And of course, I needed to cover it with a bunch of bandages. Originally, it was going to be mostly covered in bandages, but the more I kept working on the design, the more I wasn't sure how to put the bandages on the wings. I felt like they just felt directionless on the wings. They looked awkward, they felt like they were just cluttering the space, so I ended up just keeping them on the main body and the legs, and not really using them for the rest of the wings. Instead, with the wings, I went with this sort of gold plating, inspired by some art of Isis I've seen. I went with a lot of dark colors. I went with a dark blue, a gold, and dark brown for most of this palette, to sort of resemble a lot of ancient Egyptian jewelry. They use a lot of gold and I believe lapis lazuli in a lot of their pieces, and I've always thought that that look is just simply regal and gorgeous. So I really wanted to give this sort of dignified, regal presence to this little Mothman. I made its head look like it's wearing a death mask, but I also wanted to sort of allude to the Death's Head moth, which is a design that I like to do a lot for my various Mothman. It's an actual moth species where it seems to have a skull on the back, but for my Mothman designs, I like to make it look like a mask that's on their face, because I think that's a fun character design thing. So I wanted to allude to that, plus Death's Head moths are found in Africa, where Egypt is, so I thought it was another way to connect all these ideas together. Towards the end of this piece, I ended up adding a bunch of eyes to the wings. I felt like they looked a little bit plain. Originally, I just put down some texture on there. Now, a long time ago in a lot of my art, I used to use a lot of textures, but I don't really do it so much anymore, just because I haven't felt like it or felt like a piece needed it. But I thought that the wings could use a little more noise and a little more something that drew attention to them without taking away the attention from the center focal piece. So I put down this nice crumpled paper texture. I have a folder on my computer full of textures I found on Unsplash, which is a website that has a lot of free images you can use that are very high res. So, if you're looking for high quality textures or assets to use in your art, I highly recommend it. There's a lot of good stuff on there. After putting down that paper texture, I put down those golden eyes. I thought it would make it more like classic moth wings, which often have these false eye spots on them, and I thought it would make it more like it's doing a magic spell as you're seeing it. After all, it's in this active pose. Maybe this guy is casting some kind of a wonderful spell, something to maybe illuminate the crypt. That's what I like to think he's doing anyway. I don't think this one is actually malicious. I think this little mummy Mothman is a very regal and dignified little fellow, and I think he's honestly quite a gentleman, even if he looks a little intimidating. Now, let me know what you guys think of this design. I'm really happy with it. Next up, we have an all-time classic. It's a vampire. Everybody loves vampires. I think even before the Twilight craze of the mid-2000s, I think vampires have always been such a cultural staple of Halloween, and one of the monsters I think a lot of humans wish they could be the most. I mean, they're suave, they're cool, they're pretty, and violent, but also gentlemanly. I don't know. I think there's a lot of allure in pop culture towards the idea of a vampire, and I also think they have the potential to be one of the goofiest sort of undead creatures. Like, I'm not saying it's goofy to go around biting people, but You know, there is something sort of smug and whimsical about the character of a vampire, an immortal who's like all smug and flamboyant and constantly socializing instead of being reclusive. I kind of like that as an idea for a vampire. I think it's very fun. So, unlike the regal and reclusive character of my mummy Mothman, my vampire Mothman's a little bit more of a showman, someone who maybe has a lot of people at their house a lot. Or, I guess it would be their castle instead of their house. They strike me as the kind of Mothman that would have a castle. I tried to give them a bit of a dignified, smug look while also trying to work in classic vampire imagery into the design. For example, I obviously gave it vampire fangs, and because the body is predominantly white to sort of resemble the pale skin vampires typically have in media, I wanted the teeth to not be white so that way they could actually have some contrast and stand out. So I actually colored them red to make them look like they're freshly used and covered in blood. Speaking of bloody teeth, that's actually what the antennae are partly based on. There's stripes on the antenna that suggest bloody white teeth to make them a little bit more related to the rest of the design. And of course, I gave this Mothman that classic sort of widow's peak look that a lot of cartoon vampires, especially Dracula, often have. Plus, I thought it was another excuse to use some counter shading in a character design, and if you've been following the channel for a while, you know I love to put counter shading in things. I gave the eyes this sort of red glow vibe. I wanted them to look like they're a little bit luminous. And then I tried to incorporate that idea into the false eyes on the wings as well, to really make it look like those false eyes are a little more convincing. After all, I think vampires are better at deception than most other undead. And of course, I gave this guy a very long sock type design. I kind of wanted to suggest pants without actually drawing pants on a Mothman, since I thought that would probably look a little goofy, and I wanted it to look silly, but not that silly. Plus, I think like a lot of people associate like tall socks with a character who's especially promiscuous, which I feel like vampires are often depicted as, so I thought it was pretty fitting, even if it looks a little silly. I'm pretty happy with the design, and let me know how you guys feel about it. The last design of this video is probably an all-time Halloween classic. It's a classic sheet ghost. A nice classic white ghost with black eyes. I mean, is there literally any more classic, like, character design or Halloween costume design than this? I really wanted to really pay homage to what makes this design so good, which is its simplicity, while also adding a little bit of extra, like, notes and ideas to make it more of an involved character design rather than just a coloration of a white Mothman with black eyes. For example, I added some little balls of like spirit energy or flame around its body to suggest that it's kind of got a bunch of energy and orbs around it. In a lot of cultures, from anywhere from Western ideas of ghost orbs and photographs to Eastern ideas of like spirit fire, there's this sort of connection between ghosts and glowing balls of flame or light. So I thought it would be fitting to help break up this thing's silhouette and give it a little more of an identity. I also wanted to make the wings a little bit ragged and wispy, almost like an old used tissue, I want to say. And of course, I made the eyes extra creepy by making them all gooey and leaky and like it's crying. It makes it a little extra sad, a little extra scary, and it just gives a little bit more personality to this otherwise very plain design. And of course, I had a little bit of extra wisps on the ankles of this little character because I thought this ghost Mothman would look cute with little Hermes wings on its feet. Plus, it gives more to that gaseous form quality that I think classic cartoon ghosts have a lot of. I actually incorporated 3 different shapes in the backgrounds of these designs. The mummy had a nice big circle, similar to how the sun is depicted in a lot of ancient Egyptian art. The vampire had a nice big rectangle, just nice, good, and centers the composition on the face. And to sort of complete the trinity here, pun intended, we have a triangle in the background. I thought this would give a little bit extra movement to this piece and help it really make it feel like this ghost is floating off the ground. I'm really happy with this ghost design. I mean, I said the mummy was my favorite, but I think the ghost might actually be a close second. I'm just really happy with it. It's very simple, but I think it really accomplished exactly what I was setting out to do, and I'm pretty happy with it. I hope you guys are as well. And And that's all I've got for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed these little Mothman character designs. They were pretty simple, but a lot of fun to do. I just love figuring out how to do iterations of the Mothman with different spins, so I had a lot of fun with this challenge. I'll be back again with another speed paint for you guys next week that will also be Halloween themed, so look forward to that. We're gonna have a lot of fun this October with our Halloween. If you would like to support me, I recommend checking out my Ko-fi page. It's the best way to support me right now. I'm saving up as much money as I can to help pay off things like student loans and to eventually move in the future. If you have any other ideas for speed paints, please let me know in the comments. I'm always looking for more things to add to my ever-growing to-do list, and I promise I will add what you say to that list, and I'll get to it eventually. And I believe that is everything we've got today. So thank you guys so much for your time and for watching. I'll see you all next week. And in the meantime, go out there and make some art.